Breaking news, the US is at it again, guys. But are we surprised? Of course not. Pardon my voice, I have a terrible flu, but we have to talk about this. Now, if you're new here, then hit the subscribe, tap like, and don't forget to be part of the conversation by simply sharing your thoughts on what you think about this video. Now, the United States once again finds itself in the midst of contentious decisions. It always does. I mean, as calls for a permanent ceasefire echo around the world, the US stance has been consistent. We know the routine: vetoes and rejection. Now, in a recent development, the US has wielded its veto power against another proposed permanent ceasefire, leaving North Gaza in dire straits. Now, what's particularly intriguing is the rejection of an Algerian proposal, raising questions about the motivations behind these decisions. Why are they doing this? This is something that is going to put a pause, or rather a stop, on everything happening. But the US is saying no. Is it safe to say that they are happy seeing Palestinians suffer? Now, let's delve into this unfolding situation, exploring the geopolitical complexities and pondering the implications of such steadfast opposition to peace initiatives. I will be right back. Check out these videos.
Breaking news: the United States has vetoed another ceasefire resolution. This resolution was put forth by Algeria, calling for an immediate ceasefire. Y'all, in this UN Security Council meeting, the United States literally said that this resolution would cause more harm than good. More harm than good. A ceasefire resolution? And these global leaders are sitting by, allowing the United States, allowing Is Not Real to get away with it that we're literally watching live on our screens. We're watching live, and they're getting away with this. And if they could get away with this, everyone globally should be afraid. Americans should be afraid. We see that they're developing Cop City all over the United States. And if they could get away with this in Gaza...
Here we go again. The United States casts its third veto in the UN for a ceasefire. Per usual, the United States is the only one who voted against it. Shame on Joe Biden and his administration. They're all beyond theirs. I'm trying to understand, how is it possible that a nation who is funding and arming a country can then come into the UN and vote and then also use a veto? That simply just shouldn't be allowed. Today, February 20th, today just alone should have been enough to call for a ceasefire. Israelis targeted a refugee camp in central Gaza, 14 people. Every single hour that goes by, another evil act is inflicted on Palestinians. In the past 5 months, not only has the United States funded arming Israel, but they have been protecting them and defending them all 5 months. The United States is 100% responsible for the occurring in Gaza.
Of course, as expected, the U.S. vetoed the permanent ceasefire in the UN Security Council meeting today. That's we already knew it was coming. They told us it was coming, so it is what it is. But I want to mention, we need to stop paying attention to how the colonizer try to pin us against each other. They always use a black or brown person to do their dirty work, and look at all the people at the back. What we need to be doing is not give this woman or any black and brown person they use as collateral, okay, energy. Because this woman, if she decides today or tomorrow that she is for a permanent ceasefire, she's for Gaza, they'll fire her and replace her with somebody who's going to do their dirty work. So we should not give this woman energy. We should not attack her. We should not be against each other. This is what they do. Okay, they use us against each other. I had a lot of people in the beginning of when I was talking about Palestine, African people telling me like, oh, mind your business. Palestinian struggle is not your problem. That is pinning us against each other. Okay. We also had the debate about like, oh, what did Palestine do for the Black Lives Matter movement, blah, blah, blah. That is us fighting each other. It does not do anything. It doesn't do anything. This woman could be replaced in the blink of an eye with another person. She doesn't hold power. Biden, the colonizers, the people in the Senate, the governments, the powerful billionaires, the men, okay? They are the people like in control. We need to focus our energy on them. They're the problem, not this woman, not any black and brown person. So let's come together. Let's focus. Let's not be against each other, okay? She is just collateral damage. That's all it is.
The United States has just vetoed its third UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. The 15-member body voted 13-1, with the United Kingdom abstaining to adopt the resolution, which just goes to show how wide the support is for a ceasefire in the region. The UN Security Council doesn't have typical enforcement mechanisms to apply that resolution, but if it were to have been passed with the support of the United States, it would have been seen as huge international pressure by Israel's biggest supporter to stop its attacks on Gaza. And apart from the devastating international consequences that this is going to have on an oppressed and marginalized population in Gaza, this is also going to have huge domestic repercussions because the Biden administration has already positioned itself in opposition to much of the American public who wants to see a ceasefire.
Yeah, this is a very interesting point. If you haven't already heard, Algeria proposed a permanent ceasefire resolution once again to the United Nations Security Council, and the US shot it down with their veto. But not just did they it down, they used and have been using black and brown and minority individuals to endorse it through their actions. This is a very important observation to make because the way the US colonial empire works is that they pit minorities against one another so that we're so busy fighting each other we don't have any time to make changes for ourselves. Unfortunately, I have quite literally seen this rhetoric take place in comment sections of Instagram posts or in TikTok posts or whatever, any sort of social media. People were commenting on Palestinian posts, where were y'all when the Black Lives Matter movement was protesting? And vice versa. People were talking during the Black Lives Matter movement saying, oh, well, why don't you support Palestine? Why would I come out and support you? At the same time, the core figures of our movements have always stood with one another. These are just a few examples, but in Gaza and in the West Bank, there are literally murals of George Floyd painted across in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'm sure y'all already know Malcolm X's and Nelson Mandela's perspectives when it comes to Palestine. So we have to prevent and avoid this dangerous rhetoric from being used. And when we see the US utilizing such tools to pit us against each other, we gotta call that out. Because the one sole enemy we all have in common is colonization.
The best country in the world, the country that supposedly is helping every other country, right? Vetoed another immediate ceasefire resolution that was proposed today. Another ceasefire resolution has been vetoed by the United States of America. More than 30,000 Palestinians are since October 7th. And thousands and thousands and thousands more are still under the rubble. They have pushed a population of 1.9 million people into Rafah, where they were supposed to be safe, which they are now invading and of. If Palestinians are not from a starvation, they are from freezing temperatures. And their biggest fear right now is to be pushed into the desert and starved, because that is what's happening next. And the best country in the world, right, is vetoing immediate ceasefire resolution.
Breaking news about Gaza, and it's not good. The United States vetoed for a third time the United Nations resolution that called for a permanent ceasefire and an unconditional release of all. Out of 15 countries, we were the only no vote. This is hurting our moral standing. It is hurting our commitment to human rights. It is hurting our commitment to multilateralism and international institutions. What is even more shocking is the administration is getting ready to ship precision to Netanyahu's right-wing government. This, while we're telling them don't attack Rafah, we're giving them the very that they would launch at Rafah. We cannot have Netanyahu's extreme right-wing government defy the United States and continue to protect them at the United Nations and continue to ship them these precision military weapons. That is why I voted no on the $17 billion blank check to Netanyahu. That is why I am pleading with the administration to come out for a permanent ceasefire, a release of all hostages, and a just end to this brutal war.
Now, if you ask me, I would say all of this sparks a reflection on the delicate balance of power in international relations. The repeated use of the US veto against permanent ceasefires not only draws attention to the ongoing conflicts, but also raises eyebrows about the driving forces shaping these decisions. What are the driving forces shaping these decisions? As North Gaza grapples with the consequences of yet another denied proposal, the world watches closely. We are watching. Now, the rejection of the Algerian proposal adds another layer to the narrative, prompting us to ponder the diplomatic intricacies at play. Are there hidden geopolitical agendas or strategic considerations guiding these decisions? The unfolding drama in the diplomatic arena invites us to dissect the motives behind such steadfast opposition to peace initiatives and explore the broader implications for the region and beyond. Now, this stance by the US on rejecting ceasefire proposals in the midst of international calls for peace raises intriguing questions about, firstly, its foreign policy priorities and strategic considerations. Now, it prompts us to consider whether there are geopolitical interests or alliances influencing these decisions. The consistent use of veto power emphasizes the US role as a key player in shaping global resolutions, yet it also draws attention to potential consequences for stability in conflict zones. The implications of the rejected ceasefire proposals are multifaceted. On one hand, it prolongs the suffering of the people in North Gaza, amplifying the humanitarian crisis. It also challenges the effectiveness of international bodies in mediating conflicts. Additionally, the rejection of proposals, especially after a call for a permanent ceasefire, may impact the credibility and perceived impartiality of diplomatic efforts. It's worth considering the historical context and diplomatic intricacies, because this is not making sense. There's just no way. The consistent use of the veto power might be rooted in long-standing alliances, geopolitical considerations, or strategic interests in the region. I think they do have interests in the region. Now, this invites us to explore the nuanced dynamics that guide US foreign policy decisions and the delicate balance between national interests and global stability. On the ground in North Gaza, the implications of the rejected ceasefire proposals extend beyond immediate humanitarian concerns. It raises questions about the long-term effects on regional stability, potential ramifications for diplomatic relationships, and the overall credibility of international efforts in resolving conflicts. Moreover, the rejection of a ceasefire, especially following an alternative proposal, may spark debates. It has already sparked debates. Everyone is talking about it. Why do they keep on doing this? But it sparks debates about the efficacy of diplomatic channels and the need for a more inclusive, collaborative approach to conflict resolution. Now, the US literally vetoed a UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza for the third time, arguing that it would undermine negotiations over a huge deal. The US was the lone vote against a ceasefire resolution put forward on Tuesday by Algeria. Now, the UK was the sole abstention, with 13 votes in support, including those of close allies of Washington, who insisted the humanitarian needs of Palestinians overweighed any reservations over the Algerian text. Washington was widely lambasted for using its veto again at a time when nearly 30,000 Palestinians have been unalived and more than 2 million people are under threat of famine. A vote in favor of this draft resolution is a support for the Palestinians' right to life, the Algerian envoy to UN Ahmad Benjama told the council. Conversely, voting against it implies an endorsement of the brutal violence and collective punishment inflicted upon them. Now, the Algerian resolution also called for the implementation of provisional measures ordered in January by the International Court of Justice, ICJ, in The Hague, which instructed Israel to mitigate its offensive to protect civilians, lift impediments on the flow of aid into Gaza, and take action against Israeli politicians using genocidal language. Now, almost 1 month after the ICJ ruling, guys, there are no signs whatsoever of hope. Signs of hope are still absent for improvement of the situation in Gaza. Silence is not a viable option. Now is the time for action and the time for truth. Now, the Chinese ambassador said the continued passive avoidance of an immediate ceasefire is no different from giving a green light to the continued unaliving. The US has drafted an alternative resolution which calls for a temporary ceasefire as soon as practicable. It calls on Israel not to proceed with a planned offensive on Rafah, the southernmost Gazan city where more than 1 million Palestinians have sought refuge. We all know how this goes, guys, so no. However, the US resolution is not likely to go to a vote for several days at least, and the timing of its third ceasefire veto is embarrassing for the US as Washington seeks to build international solidarity in condemnation of Shah on the second anniversary later this week of its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now, explaining the veto, the US envoy Linda Thomas-Greenfield said that Joe Biden was in the midst of negotiations with Israel, Egypt, and Qatar aimed at clinching a comprehensive deal. Any action this council takes right now should help, not hinder these sensitive and ongoing negotiations. And we believe that the resolution on the table right now would in fact negatively impact those negotiations, Thomas Greenfield argued, demanding an immediate and conditional ceasefire without an agreement requiring Hamas to release theirs will not bring about durable peace. Instead, it could extend the fighting between Hamas and Israel, she added, later denouncing the 13-1 vote for the Algerian resolution as wishful and irresponsible. Now, Thomas Greenfield looked on stony-faced as a series of Washington allies, including France, Slovenia, and Switzerland, explained their reasons for voting for the resolution, despite sharing the US's reservation that it did not include any condemnation of Hamas, something the Security Council has so far failed to do. They all argued the humanitarian disaster in Gaza was so dire that stopping the fighting could precedence over such concerns. Now, the French envoy said Paris regretted that the resolution was not adopted, given the disastrous situation on the ground. The only vote sparing the US from total isolation was the British abstention. The ambassador Woodward said the UK position was to call for an immediate suspension in fighting to get aid and is out, leading to a permanent sustainable ceasefire. But Woodward echoed Thomas Greenfield's arguments in adding, simply calling for a ceasefire as this resolution does will not make it happen. Indeed, it could endanger the negotiations. It could actually make a ceasefire less likely. What is happening, guys? Now, the US showed its alternative draft to other council members before Tuesday's vote, and this unusual step was intended, one Western diplomat suggested, to avoid giving the impression that the US veto implied a green light for the Israeli attack on Rafah. But isn't that what they're doing? This is awfully embarrassing for the Americans, but what do you, my viewers, have to say about this issue? Share your views, comments, opinions in the comment section down below. Let's hear your take.